Here in Asia, gold is not only a store of value, it is a physical representation of wealth and prosperity to be worn at weddings, important events, you name it, and gifted at every opportunity. But one New York based exchange is also betting that digital gold is taking on a whole new luster in this part of the world. Welcome to Word on the Block, the series that takes a deeper dive into blockchain and the emerging technologies that shape our world at the intersection of business, politics, and economy. It's what we cover right here on Forkast.News. I'm Angie Lau, editor-in-chief. Well, they call it the Lion City, Singapore, and it has roared life into the crypto exchange business as it is one of the few jurisdictions where it is legal to trade. It has become an important legal hub. And now Gemini, the New York-based crypto exchange founded by the Winklevoss twins, is expanding its Singapore operations. Let's find out what is supporting the business case. My next guest today is EUGINING, who leads Gemini's business developments and partnerships in the Asia Pacific. Eugene, great to have you on the show.
Hey, hi Angie. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So you know what I'm talking about. The Asians love the gold.
Yeah, absolutely. Who does not like gold in Asia? We all love our gold.
Well, it's tongue in cheek a little bit, but now there is digital gold, Bitcoin, and a new asset class that also a lot of wealthy with a lot of discretionary dollars looking to expand portfolios and diversify is also looking to. Here at Forecast, we know Asia is leading a lot of innovation in this space. Tell us what you are seeing and experiencing and why Singapore operations for Gemini is expanding.
Yeah, I guess one is what we're seeing in Asia is in Singapore, especially given that Singapore has a very thoughtful regulations around cryptocurrency and always, right? It's always been a very pivotal role in Asia, driving a very thoughtful way of paving for regulated firms like Gemini to operate. And the ethos of Gemini really is to work with regulations. We like regulations. We welcome that. And that's the reason why we feel like Singapore is going to drive this innovation in a very meaningful way. And secondly, Singapore ideally it has the right infrastructure, it has the skilled workforce, it's got the right supportive regulations, and with that sort of regime, it's going to be really healthy for cryptocurrency companies like us. And lastly, Gemini has always been making baby steps, right, in growing our franchise. From UK launch to the Singapore launch, we have always planned to make and turn Gemini into a global company. So it's always been in the works, and I think this is what we're saying, that we are making a commitment to Asia, and we want to. And cryptocurrency is really a global phenomenon. It's a movement globally, right? And if you talk about gold, the lastly, when the way I like to tell people, Bitcoin is essentially Go 2.0. So it's really easy to digest that. And I think being in Singapore, it's really allowing Gemini to help Asians to access cryptocurrency more easily than ever before.
Tell us about some of the new offerings for Gemini. I understand it's now also supporting the Sing dollar. So
Yeah,
what does this mean for people?
yeah, Gemini, being a regulated exchange, we are the first North American exchange to launch Bitcoin and Ethereum Singapore dollar fiat pairings. And that makes it so easy for local citizens here to access cryptocurrency. And that's really our mission. And we also included DeFi tokens that we're very excited. And so that's also another initiative we've been pushing. And that's, and in the following weeks and months, we will be obviously, launching numerous innovative products for this part of the world.
Yes, the competition, though, is intensifying there in Singapore. Recently, we reported that DBS is launching an exchange. This is a traditional Asian-based bank that is getting into the crypto exchange business. We also know that existing crypto giants like Binance and Coinbase and so on are getting into the space. How does Gemini fit into this competition, and what kind of investors will be targeted to use your platform?
Yeah, I'm not surprised, given that Singapore's positioning itself as a crypto fintech hub in Asia Pacific. So you're obviously going to be seeing a lot of new entrants and players. With the DBS news, I think it's a great, testimony that and legitimizes the entire asset class. So for me, we welcome that. As the saying goes, a rising tide lifts all boats. So whether it's a DBS or another player, we welcome that. It's a very nascent market, really in the early stages, right? So there's no real competition, and we embrace that.
You got to embrace it, because it seems that the ocean is rising, the level is rising. Give us some insights about the market in Asia. I think, a lot of people, certainly in the West, are surprised about the innovation and the speed in which things are adopted, and certainly the enthusiasm and the energy, even amongst consumers. Give us some of your observations on the level of interest from Asian institutions. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think when I first spoke with institutions 6 months ago, the response was very lukewarm. It was, we'll take a look when we have some time. But today, fast forward today, they're actually sending us, a lot of inquiries. It's all inbound. So that's really a 180 degrees change. I think that's a testimony that we have come to the inflection point where it's not just a penny sort of asset class. It's more than just pump, like a token, right? It's more than that. And I think the type of conversations are a lot deeper, a lot more thoughtful. And with news like Square, PayPal, all these big giant fintech companies talking about crypto and banks. I'm confident that a lot of the CEOs and C-level suite management are asking, what's our digital asset strategy? And that's the type of inbound interest we're seeing. And I think that's going to continue for the rest of the year.
I totally agree with you. It is curious to also note the spectrum of knowledge. Some are really in the early phases. Some are much more sophisticated and advanced in these discussions. Where in the range would you say Asian institutions are?
It's I don't think it's a one size fits all. When it comes to answering that question, it really depends on who you're talking to. With the entire spectrum, I would say that generally speaking, the larger the institution, there is going to be a lot more of a formal processy, and they are probably going to move a lot slower. With respect to a family office where there is more discretion and they can be more nimble. So it really depends on the type of organization that we speak to. But yeah, I think one commonality is that all of these guys are they are aware of crypto, and they do have that basic understanding of Bitcoin.
One of the things that we note here in Asia in terms of the investor class is that 40% of the average Asian portfolio actually sits in cash and alternative assets. Now, that is a significant chunk of any portfolio that is essentially in play for cryptocurrency, digital assets, alternative assets. How are you seeing the pickup of interest and migrating some of these, cash and alternative assets into cryptocurrency?
Yeah, that's a great question. The traditional portfolio 60/40 is not going to play out. It's not going to work, especially with three-quarters of the bonds yielding a negative yield. That's not going to work for any corporate treasury. So, having a small allocation, whether is it 0.1% to 5%, it all makes sense. And we're starting to hear and have that sort of conversations with a lot of different types of, firms. And so I feel like that's a natural progression in diversification, and it really increases your Sharpe ratio of the entire portfolio. And with the innovation that we're seeing in crypto space today, you don't just buy Bitcoin and hold it. There is so many other use cases. You can invest in an interest bearing product. So it's more than just diversifying, and it's becoming more of a investment product. So I think that's really changing the way people look at Bitcoin in their portfolio.
That's great insight right there. You know, in the pioneering days in America, it was go west, young man. Well,
Yeah,
now it's go east, right?
exactly. Yeah.
This
So
is where
so
all the action is. I'm curious, and you don't have to. You could deduct names, but what are some of the anecdotes? Like, give us one of the most interesting conversations you've had with somebody? You know, maybe 6 months ago, you were like they were, and just to give us a sense of the shift in enthusiasm. Can you share a story with us without necessarily sharing names? Would love to hear it.
yeah, so one of the one of the client of mine, that I know before joining Gemini. He was, they obviously are a very big and large organization, and they were looking into cryptocurrency, but there were a lot of, I would say, resistance, and
Right.
and there's obviously the guy who manages it and is pushing it for this initiative, but he's getting a lot of pushback. And the poor guy, there is a lot of career risk, especially during COVID times. You don't want to be that guy who, try to push an initiative that may sound pretty crazy in times like this. Fast forward that, and I remember, him, telling me, bro, it's so hard to get things done. We move like, a tortoise, and my management was telling me that, don't try to do anything that's out of the ordinary. Just, play, just get, do what you have to
Stay
do,
the
right? But
course. Stay the
just stay the
course. Yeah.
course, yeah.
Yeah.
And he got so much, from his colleagues and co-workers and his bosses. And
Yeah.
and now today he's essentially telling me that everybody's flooding his email addresses. Like 6 months ago, whenever he's sending an email to somebody to request for time to speak with them, and no response, or a very cold email back. Today he's getting so many people that even guys who are more senior than him sending him emails requesting for his time, but he's literally snowed. Like he's getting so much requests to speak to him. And now he's like, guys who are not so friendly with him are actually super friendly with him now, given that, tides obviously changed. And he's the guy who runs digital assets for an organization. So today he's became, from a not so popular guy in the firm to a very popular guy, almost a celebrity status, because everybody wants his time. And
Oh,
and
that's funny.
so yeah, and so that's really funny. And we were just having that conversation last week. So it's so timely that you asked me this.
It's Guangxi, right? It's who you
Yeah,
know, and suddenly everybody wants to know him.
yeah, yeah,
Everybody wants to know this guy, and you know, increasingly we're also getting a sense that you know, as people are flooding into this space, what are some of the questions that are still outstanding that you know that they want to educate themselves on, these family offices, these ultra high net worth clients, private wealth, you know, managers are trying to field these questions. In your experience, what are some of the questions that are still out there that you know people are still unsure about and they want to know?
yeah. I think one of the things that they really want to figure out is the custody of their assets. Like who exactly, hold these assets. If I'm going to be trading on Gemini, who's exactly holding it? So that's, I think the number one concern that most investors have. It's a departure from our traditional securities where we buy a stock and it gets sent into one of our CDPs in Singapore. But in crypto, it is slightly different. The exchange is also the clearer, it's also the broker, it's also the custody. So that's a great departure, and that requires a shift in thinking for these investors. So I think custody has always been the primary consideration when it comes to family offices and financial institutions when they first dip their toes into cryptocurrency. And the second one would be, what else besides Bitcoin? What else can I invest in besides Bitcoin? So that's also another very commonly asked question that we get. And then lastly, I would say it's where can you exactly buy your Bitcoin? And a lot of these financial institutions feel very much comfortable with Gemini because of our regulations and the fact that we play by the rules. And so many of the times they will say, hey, look, Eugene, we want to be buying Bitcoin from you guys because you guys are obviously a very regulated and secure exchange. So that's also the question where how secure you guys are. Do you guys actually have compliance policies in place? How do you look at security? How do you look at KYC AML? So these guys are actually looking at these things and we answer those questions for them.
Bitcoin, as we know, is a gateway crypto, for lack of a better characteristic
Yeah.
or characterization. But look, a lot of volatility this month. Reached a number of new all-time highs after sitting at its oldest all-time high for 3 years. I think it was 19,750, something like that. It reached nearly 42, and now depending on when you're watching it, it definitely the volatility has been expressed. For those who have been in this space for a while, how do you assess Bitcoin's volatility in January and in the first quarter of this year, as it relates to more the traditional volatility moves that we're seeing in traditional equity markets?
Well, it's a great question. Whenever anybody asks us or asks me about volatility, I say, hey, look, take a look at some of the crazy penny stocks that we are seeing in today's market. You have GameStop that's trading like bananas, and so it makes Bitcoin's volatility looks like, very, very simply, very minute, very muted. And I feel like with any new asset class, volatility is something in which it's not uncommon. You see volatility in many of the very nascent asset classes, the early years, the early formative years of asset class. So for me, I like to tell people, hey, look, if you're going to be buying Bitcoin, look at it as a generational bet. Look at it as a long-term investment. If you stretch the chart over 10 years, that volatility is just a small blip, in the chart. So that's how I look at volatility, and that's how institutional investors are starting to look at it.
So a long-term view versus a short-term view. You don't want to catch that falling knife, as it were.
Exactly.
Uh, but it is also very interesting that as a gateway crypto, family offices, ultra high net worths, clients are talking about, hey, what about altcoins? What about other crypto? We've seen the rise in Ethereum as a result of this frothiness that we've been seeing with Bitcoin. But what about the other altcoins out there? What's the narrative you think that's evolving?
Yeah, I think with Bitcoin's success and a great marketing brand for cryptocurrency as an asset class, it has generated positive spill over to the other tokens. And I think that's going to drive the asset class. Like I would say to people, the stock market is more than the FANGs. It is so many other stocks out there, just like cryptocurrency. There's so many tokens out there, and obviously with any new asset class, there are going to be some that will eventually go. A majority of these stock tokens going to zero, and there's obviously some that are going to hit 10x, 100x, 1000x. So I think it comes down to really understanding what you're investing in. And the next narrative, I would say, there's a few narratives that's playing out. I guess one being DeFi. I think that's a great use case. And I think that's such a promising space. It's really breaking down the whole centralized finance narrative. And the second narrative, I would say, NFTs, non-fungible tokens, that is such a great, narrative. I think it's going to gain a lot of momentum this year. And the third narrative, I would say, it's really the top, five tokens, right? You will start seeing greater inflow of money coming into these top five tokens because when institutions come in, they will likely buy the top five tokens and then subsequently look into the altcoins. But these are my three narratives for the coming year.
I, here in Asia, it's real estate, art. These are physical assets that are absolutely valued in terms of ownership. Do you see that also becoming, in an NFT or digital asset? What is that migration or trend line looking like for you?
Yeah, I think that's already happening. We have, NFTs, in the form of art, and that's, we have, we've seen, crazy auctions going for this. And I feel like that's the narrative where we're transiting into a digital economy, where truly digital, when I'm talking about, like things in a digital form. So whether is it, your favorite whiskey to your favorite art piece, I think they're all going to be on the blockchain in a matter of time.
Well, gold has a significant symbol of wealth in Asia. We of course, tongue in cheek started off this conversation with that. But how much has gold changed as an investment in the eyes of investors in the Asia Pacific region? Do you also see that, it cannot be replaced, or do you think that there's starting also to be a transfer of wealth to digital gold?
Yeah, I think Bitcoin is the better version of gold. It's the gold 2.0. It's digital scarcity, its portability, and its divisibility, right? So these three things that gold do not have. And so for me, I feel like that's I don't think Bitcoin is competing with gold. I think Bitcoin is a digital store of value that represents something slightly different. And a gold investor can also be a Bitcoin investor, right? And a stock investor can also be a Bitcoin investor, but not a gold investor. So I feel like that's not really Bitcoin is not really competing with gold, but rather it stands on its own.
That's there's no doubt about it. I, also standing on its own, very strong 2 feet. First in the New York market and now internationally is Gemini. So when Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss, your bosses there in New York, have been making comments in the market of potentially going public. Are we going to see this in SPAC form, a reverse listing? Are we going to see a publicly listed Gemini exchange soon?
Yeah, great question. I wish, I can answer that. It's beyond my paycheck. So I don't think I can comment on that.
You're a better fly on the wall than I am, so I gotta ask.
Yeah.
I
No, you
totally
you
get
have
it.
to ask, right? It's your job to ask, and it's like I say, it's beyond my pay grade. So I'm going to be politely declining that question.
But there's no doubt that the growth in the international markets, specifically in Asia, is going to be critical to the trajectory of Gemini. How much resources, how much capital is going into the Asia expansion?
Yeah, I think Jeremy was the first hire. He's the managing director for APAC. He joined us from Leontech, where he was sitting as a CEO, so he has 25 years of financial services experience. So we got him last year, June, and fast forward that 6 months today, we have got six employees in Singapore, and we should be, tripling that headcount in the next 12 months. So we're putting into a lot of resources into this region. It's such an important region for Gemini. And we think that, with Singapore being the epicenter, we want to be here, positioning ourselves.
What's a projected revenue growth in terms of percentage? If you are, starting January 2021, what's your anticipated growth for this year in terms of percentage increase? And then what's your projected, market reach over the next few years?
I think it's still early days in the sense that we haven't really got we don't really put that number out there and say, hey, look, this is a number that we're going to be projecting. This is a number we want to be getting into. I think it's more about going to the right market, sizing the right opportunity, and then getting the most impact with whatever resources that we are given. So that's how we look at different markets in Asia. That we want to be strategic. We want to play by the rules. We want to even if the market is big, we have to ensure that we are going with the right setup in terms of regulations, in terms of security compliance. So it is not simply to grow at all costs, but really to grow in a very thoughtful manner. So that's how
Yeah.
we look at Asia. How do we grow our business?
as we look at the business as well, we got to take a look at the addressable market here in Asia. In your view, what is Gemini's Asia addressable market that it hopes to target? What's the size and scope of it?
Yeah, like I said before, we offer fiat on-ramp for Honky Dollar and Aussie. So it's a natural extension to our APAC expansion. So I think, those two markets are going to be really interesting for Gemini in the short term. But with Asia being such a large part of the world, we are, sizing up the opportunity very carefully with each go-to-market strategy, depending on the regulation, depending on the sophistication of the users, depending on the type of institutions that are actually having that sort of interest. So it really depends on a variety of factors. But the way we look at Asia, it's such a diverse part of the world. And so I think, Hong Kong, Australia, I think it's likely, we're likely to put in more resources into those two parts of the world.
So we'll see the footprint expanding. Well, Eugene, thank you so much for giving us some insights into your growth projections for Asia and certainly what we're already seeing in the space. And before I let you go, a lot of our audience is learning about this asset class. A lot of our audiences have been here for years. In your view, your top three best practices for wading into a new asset class if you're unfamiliar.
Yeah, so number one, buy only as much as you're willing to lose. You never invest more than you should. Never take a leverage on the type or the amount of crypto that you're buying. Second is, have a long-term perspective. If you are buying today hoping for a 50% increase in price, that's not, Bitcoin isn't the right investment for you. Third thing I would say, custody. Ensure that you're safekeeping your assets in a very safe and secure manner. So these three things.
And if you have a cold wallet, don't forget your password and put it somewhere safe where you'll remember it. That's probably one too.
Yeah, Angie, look at you. You're an expert.
We just are reporting in this space, and we just note that poor guy who has probably one last chance to get at his Bitcoin cash.
I
But we it's certainly a new asset class. It has been one we've been watching for a while, and certainly you see the prescience of this industry, including your friend, who is now the most popular guy in the company.
Yes, thank you.
Eugene, it was great talking with you. That's Eugene Ung here from Gemini Asia Pacific, talking to us about expanding Singapore operations. It was great to have you on the show, Eugene.
Thank you, Angie. Thank you very much for your time.
And thank you, everyone, for joining us on this latest episode. I'm Angie Lau, Forkast.News, Editor-in-Chief. Until the next time. If you like that, come back for more. All you have to do is click like, always comment, we love that, and subscribe. And don't forget to watch the next one.